thank you very much. On behalf of the team that produced Latino Americans, to breathe life into the work that you're going to do is just priceless, and the reason they created the series. They want Latinos and non-Latinos alike to be excited about learning and sharing together. A documentary like this is not all inclusive, is not all encompassing. It's the tip of the iceberg. A lot of thought and care, as you saw, went into the copy and development of each minute really of the documentary, in the hopes that in the hands of librarians and cultural workers like you can really get community excited about learning together. So I'm just happy to be here and to thank you on everyone's behalf, and especially to the NEH and ALA. I'm a longtime cultural worker with museums and theater and in public media for well over a decade, both PBS and NPR. I also work as an independent cultural producer, creating events, project design, either projects that I create on my own or as an independent consultant. So yeah, David from the NEH and Laney asked me to share a little bit of what I've done with Latino Americans, but the main thing is to know that also I'm a resource for you. Any questions, any sensitive questions that might come up with community, any historical tension, friction, if you want to bounce design, everything from marketing to crisis management, should you have Spanish on a flyer or not, because the expectation is that then everyone on the panel will speak Spanish. We can talk that through. So I'm here to be a resource, and I'm just, again, very honored to just be a part of your brilliance and dedication and beautiful creativity. But in doing the Latino Americans work, folks felt validated was the takeaway. We created literally hundreds, and the nature of the events were different because we were trying to build some awareness. PBS invests so much money in the quality of the production of the piece, we don't really have the money for marketing. And the humanities is really what is important about a document like this. So the investment in the work is just really trying to create events to get people excited, and some earned media, but it's not like a full-blown marketing campaign that you would find like from a corporate entity. So the main thing is that we're seen, we're heard, we're validated. One of the founders from the Dreamers said, why didn't I have this in high school? So to your point, yes, we are really hoping that the youth, especially since increasingly, they're blended families, multi-ethnic families, multi-ethnic communities, that they really see themselves and kind of participate in new and exciting ways. So as I said, what hundreds of events were produced to support the launch of the series, and I think the biggest takeaway is that the feedback was that it was validating, and it meant a lot to have the PBS imprimatur, the investment of quality and storytelling that PBS really can only do. And you'll have this, by the way, so I'll do it quick in the interest of time, and so that we can really have more conversation. Again, these were launch events, so we had the benefit of a lot of the talent, and in some cases, depending on where you're located, whether it's on the Eastern Seaboard, Northern California, Boston, I might still have access to some of the filmmakers. So if stay in touch with me. You have my email in the back, neyda.martinez@gmail.com. If we're available, we'll certainly be happy to be a part of it. Sometimes that gets people excited to have someone from behind the scenes involved. So yeah, you guys are excellent curators, so these are just some of the programs that we did. So of course we had the launch event, but then I was trying to work with community as you create the partnerships to get them invested in the curation of the talks by trusted thought leaders and educators and scholars. So I had the late Juan Flores died recently. The late Juan Flores, who was also a project advisor, and then a journalist and educator, Ed Morales, curate, talk through the panel discussions. And they were smaller, they were informal, but they were still highly successful. And departing from the themes, for example, in Dr. Flores' talked about the Afro-Latino identity. So again, they're kernels. You can unpack so much with this series. And again, these are just some examples of the types of partnerships. I mean, certainly, a lot of the ideas have already been put forth. Clergy, educators, retired school teachers, public workers, people from unions. Depending on how you work with your scholar and the topic that you want to explore, really stretch and think and, invite different kind of voices to your community programs. So these are just samples of them. We've worked with the museums and in Chicago. And depending on your market, we may be able to connect you to the public television station. And they're also invested long term in engaging with the Hispanic population. So contact me and we'll find out if it's a station that has the bandwidth. Not all of them have the same kind of staffing and resources, but to the extent possible, I'm sure they would like to know what you're doing as well, and maybe we can give you, in that way, some promotional support vis-a-vis the local events that you put together. And let's see, so this is just a summary of what worked and why. I worked for a long time with museums and the visual arts, and then I was brought onto the staff of the public theater, which was invested in diversity in a very holistic and integral way. When George C. Wolfe was at the helm, wanted to see the audiences of the theater, because it's a call and response, it's live, and to see them as, like you see on a New York street or on the subway platform, because it just creates a different energy. And he was, in the art space, he was pretty forward and pretty early and wanting to do this intentional, diverse and outreach and engagement, but a little bit out of the box. It's because it's not a one-way, it's a two-way, it's a dialogue, and it's long-term. So of course, a lot of the things that you already heard, it's about the shared vision. Know that it's going to take work. Know that it's going to be intentional. And like Andrea said, this goes beyond the grant cycle and beyond the program. I think it's about how we want to be a participant in our local community. We want to be outward facing. We do have to be mindful and know our local histories. There's tensions that might come up. Someone said, I represent the man. I think it was you. Those power plays, those issues really come up and threaten and can hinder the success of a partnership. So those sensitivities you do want to think through, and when you deploy your people, you do want to make sure that they're the ones, not necessarily Latino, sure, but more than that they have the heart for it, that they're invested in caring in the long term, in being outward facing, in being truly holistic and inclusive. Because you're breathing life not only into you're breathing life into the series, but more importantly, our cultural treasures, libraries, museums, we're also in a transformative time. We're no longer, just quiet little churches. We're living, breathing, dynamic, exciting places to be, and safe spaces and social levelers too. So we're dealing with a lot of factors about the diversity of the community and the people that we're engaging. Educate the folks, again, on your shared vision. Think deeply about how you are going to convey the work that you're going to do. You're walking the walk in a new way, but people are very observant and very vigilant, and know that in your community you have your activists, you have your reactionary types. Once you kind of open yourself up, they're going to be watching the authenticity and the intentionality of your work. So just know that it has to be sustained, particularly with the Hispanic community, whether they're recent arrivals or third or fourth generations. There are persons that are, just tired of kind of swooping in and just kind of mining people's intellectual and creative capital and walking away because the project is over, or feeling like, oh, why should this big institution have the access of my network and resources, and then I might not see them again. If there's one thing, like the segments brought up, we care about family, we care about education, but we do care also that that it's a very serious investment, because once they open up their hearts to you, like corporate America knows, with the trillion buying power and brand loyalty that the Latinos have, they're loyal and they'll stick with you in hard times and good times. And it's an important, of course, population to court and be a part of the community because we live in the community together. And we're all, whether we're in San Francisco or in Iowa, really thinking creatively about how we're going to reinvent our communities. Um, so at the Public Theater, we were not seeing the diverse audiences, and people weren't understanding theater. They weren't understanding why Shakespeare was relevant or why some of these folks should hear these new diverse young playwright voices. So we created, kind of like a Sunday tea series, free at 3, and invited, the key stakeholders, and it was about once a month, but we did provide hearty food, not finger food. We provided real food that celebrated them. So if it was an African American audience, we had soul food. If it was they were Caribbean, rice, beans, plantains, Mexican, because we knew that the content was new, and some people are open, some people are not. But we did want everyone to feel welcome and happy to be there. And I think that there has to be a joy. That's why when you deploy your people and you have your investment from your director to your volunteers, it has to be joyful work. It's hard work, but it's very beautiful work. But there has to be that commitment and dedication to it. And over time, people came, they paid for tickets, they became members. We even got some surprise donors. No one expected that. I used to get comments from my coworkers at the Public Theater. They used to coin it the ghetto corner. And they were like, oh, well, are you happy now that all of these, criminals and delinquents are coming to the plays? I had to deal with that in my own institution. So, the resistance is real sometimes. But as you continue to work, you review and analyze your steps, what you did, how did you connect, what were the barriers. It's constant reflection, constant pivoting, constant follow-up. Again, especially with your community partners and particularly Latino Americans, because while we are doing hearts and mind work, humanities work, trying to get people to open up, that in many respects, I know, at least in my experience, Latinos, especially, and the elders, were very reticent about opening up. This is very new to us, I think. The scholars may know more than me, but I think that that's a cultural sensitivity to be mindful of. We do need to just be truthful about the expectations, and have our partners lined up, like you thought about the security deeply. Think also about the mental illness aspect, psychology. You want to have a resource list because we can't do it all. We're not social workers. We're creating a safe space. We're the conveners. But there's so many institutional barriers as to why this population perhaps hasn't been engaged or felt invited to your organization, that once the trust is established and they found a sensitive ear, we may get a lot of information that we're not prepared for. So you do want to think about, the partnerships with the schools, the partnership with different institutions, so that you can help facilitate a referral. In a way, there are unintended outcomes sometimes of when we kind of open a door. And we do want to be thoughtful and think about those things thoroughly. But follow-up is key, as you know. Many communities are so tired of hit-and-run initiatives. So think through deeply with your leadership. The numbers are there to support you. The census reports are there. The children, the mixed families. Everything is there to support you to make this a real business case for long-term investment. But everyone has to be invested, which means from the board or the public and public officials to the volunteers and donors. So it's the work is external, but it's internal too. And then partnerships, sometimes you don't need a huge advisory council, but you need the right advisory council, especially with the Latino community. The referral is key, like who is the one that's inviting you? Who is the one that's endorsing you? It's about reputation more than anything else. So think deeply about the partners, why your objectives has been articulated earlier. And again, constant, think, plan, act, measure, learn, evaluate, pivot as needed. But it's just constant work and evaluation, as you well know. For the Public Theater, before Nilo Cruz won the Pulitzer, we had one of his earlier works. He was very happy with the work. We'd never really done, it was one of the first times that we did an engagement campaign. So I had a very lean advisory board. One was the America Society and a local business owner who had a independent Hispanic bookstore. And so it was lean. It wasn't huge. You do want to think about that as well. Big is good, but small is nimble. And we're building blocks. So it depends on where you are in your organizational work with cultivating diverse and multicultural audiences, how many people you want to bring to the table. Because that's something that can be planned for growth. But this was a very lean team, and we had a very successful and robust public program that made, the partners and the playwright, more importantly, very, very happy. And it translated to visibility in sales and press. So we had a huge public program with like 5 independent Latino theater companies having like this talk on site at the public theater about the state of Latino theater. We had Nilo Cruz reading, at an independent Hispanic community bookstore. I had a moderated talk at the America Society with playwrights, with Nilo and a visual artist, and I curated then an artist of his generation from Cuba to have this dialogue with the play, so that while people were in the lobby, they also were taking in the visual work. But you're building bridges, and as Stephen said, the change over time, and you're connecting. And you're creating value, not just dollars and cents, that people may be spending, but real value that can be articulated to your public officials, to your major donors. And when you're cultivating these relationships, again, you will maybe hear some things that might take you aback, or that you didn't expect for, because you're doing the work with such a open mind and an open heart. So we have to, I think, like Andrea was saying, expect the unexpected, and, thank them. Because sometimes I know for one of our people at the public theater, it took 5 years to turn a relationship around. But we were always grateful, kept on inviting them, just thank them for their candor, just thank them for their candor and say, I understand, I respect, I know that this has been a historical situation in 1999, that, da-da-da-da-da. But over time and consistency, some people will do it because it's their nature, or some people will do it because they're genuinely hurt. But just expect that. So not every partnership is going to be lovey-dovey, fuzzy-wuzzy. But we have to show gratitude, because how we walk and how we do our work, especially since, we're kind of publicly funded institutions, it really speaks to not only the quality and intention of your work, but the content, and speaks to the missions and goals of the greater, common good program that the humanities has made such an investment in. And then these are just some tips that you probably all know better than me. When you think about partnerships, it's really important to also be mindful about your local community histories, any historical tensions, those feelings may bubble up. The power play, the perception, whether it's real or perceived, that you have the power, that you have the access, and you're trying to create an equitable dynamic, a friendly ecosystem, and it's like I heard, I think on NPR this morning, it's an ecosystem, it's nature, it's not a park where you deliberately planned it out. So things are going to sprout in unexpected places. So be upfront about what you can and cannot do. And make it fun, because sometimes talking about these hard subjects, I feel that the beauty of working in arts and culture and humanities is that we can make learning fun. Like the kids were demanding, they wanted to get the information. I think we have to make the learning inviting. We have to make people fall in love with learning and sharing, and that is not always easy. And then just some key takeaways. Again, the main thing is to build loyalty, build trust. We can't violate that trust. Once we do, you'll have all of this in your packet. I think local intelligence is really key, because while there are common threads and themes, each person is different, each locality is different too, and we have to value and respect those nuances. The Hispanic Engagement Initiative, like any initiatives with any community, you do want to make sure that there's buy-in, because when there's not buy-in institutionally, it leaks out, it ekes out, and it can really undermine and erode the intentionality of your work. And they're precious connections once you have them. And once you have a flourishing partnership, you don't know where it's going to lead. So you do want to nurture them and sustain them and protect them.